Hello and welcome. It is Big Talk with Todd and Noah, presented by Xfinity. Although it is not Todd and Noah this week, it is everyone's favorite progressive backup quarterback, Colt
Let's go.
McCoy.
That's
What's up,
right.
Colt?
How about that? If you ever need a wasp nest to come down, you know who to call.
Dude, you had elite form, by the way, on that ladder. I
Oh,
was impressed.
yeah, man. It took me about 1,000 tries, but we filmed all day and found the right one, I guess.
Hey, man, if it's 1,001, whatever it is, it got the job done.
We filmed it
Uh,
at every angle. I mean, we had to slowly go cameras at every angle. So,
Oh, people don't
uh,
realize how difficult acting actually is because even if you have an outstanding take, they need it from the backside,
that's
then
right.
the right side. And so I'm impressed. I was thoroughly impressed when it popped up. By the way, we are recording this on a Tuesday morning. Tonight is when the first 12-team college football playoff ranking is going to be announced. So do you have any predictions, anything you're looking forward to as the CFP gets released for the first time?
Yeah, look, I think the first 4 or 5 teams, I think we could all know who that's going to be, right? I
Yeah,
think the question for me is those 6 through 12. Like, what's that? Where's Indiana going to be, right? Like, nobody expected Indiana to be 9-0, first time in school history. They're rolling. Got to call their game last week against Michigan State. Um, where do they end up? To me, they're worthy of being like 6, 7, somewhere around in there. I don't know where they'll put them based on, the question is, do you put them that high based on what they've done this year, or do you value like where everybody was ranked, at the start of the season? Because
sure.
Indiana wasn't on anybody's radar. Hopefully, that's not the case, but I think they're legit, and there's a lot of like one-loss teams that have some, these last 3 weeks. There's going to be a lot come to light, so it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited just to see, to exactly your point, how much are they valuing name brand and things of that nature? How much are they evaluating the overall system of what they've done this year and the overall results of what we've seen? Speaking of, let's talk about the biggest game in the Big Ten last week, just to start this one. Penn State and Ohio State. And that was a game that a lot of people had circled. Ryan Day had certainly circled. James Franklin had certainly circled. And something we had talked about with Todd last week of just how important this was going to be for both teams in the eventual seasons they were going to have. And Ohio State gets a massive win in Happy Valley, 20-13, hard fought defensive Big Ten battle as it went through for 4 quarters.
Yeah, look, I think Ohio State's defense played outstanding. Like
Yeah.
being able to stop Penn State a couple times down tight there when they got first downs, way down close to the goal line, coming out of that with no points. I mean, they get a pick six. I didn't think Ohio State, maybe played their best game or close to a perfect game. I mean, they found a way to figure out how to win it, on the road. Something that they've done honestly pretty consistently through the years, right? And going into this game, I really felt like Penn State had a chance to really kind of like stick it to Ohio State. I didn't feel like Ohio State has really, and I still don't, by the way, have put together just a totally complete game based on their coaches and their roster and sort of their expectations for where they want to go. But obviously a big win for them. Will Howard played well.
Yeah.
I think there's one thing about Will Howard is that he's in control, right? He manages the game very well. He's got great receivers around him. I think you and I talked about this. Moving Jackson out to left tackle may have helped them a little bit. I know they were kind of figuring out that front five or starting five. But look, he threw a pick six early in the game and came back and won the game, and that's what you want from your starting quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, look, they've lost a couple of left tackles, not just one, but two high impact guys at that position. And especially as a quarterback, how important that position is. But running the football is what they hang their hat on. And they've got two of the best running backs in the entire country. And they proved it once again. Judkins had a nice day. Henderson broke away on a couple of big runs, especially on that final drive to eventually ice the game. And Will Howard uses his legs probably better than I think most people think of him as. They don't necessarily think of him as a dual threat guy, and he showcased that. Look, James Franklin continues to struggle on some of those big games. 1-13 against Ohio State and Michigan, the only win coming in 2016. 0-11 against AP top 5 teams. That's the storyline right now, certainly in Happy Valley. And for Ryan Day, It was his first win against a team that was 7-0 or better. His record is nearly perfect. It has just been 1 or 2 losses every year. And so now here we are, college football playoff ranking coming out this week. And Cole, it feels like Ohio State controls its own destiny. Now they've got to win out, because I do think if they lose one more, and that one loss could be to Indiana, if they go in with 2 losses, I don't see them making it, just based on how everything's shaping out. But they've certainly put themselves back in their own driver's seat, and they are in control the rest of the way.
Yeah, I'm with you. Ohio State is they're one of the best teams in the country, right? And especially when you look at them on paper, right? They're at the top. And I thought their defense played really well. They got put in some tough situations in that game, and they held Penn State. Now on the flip side, it's like, Penn State, come on, man! Like, where's Tyler Warren? You get down there inside the
Yes.
10, like, can we find a way to get him the football, right? You got a big, storyline with him. He's all over. He's such a versatile player. That was a little bit frustrating to watch. But listen, like, everybody wants to dogpile on James Franklin right now. Haven't beat Ohio State. Haven't beat Michigan. 1-13 against these teams. 0-11 against top 5 AP teams. Well, let's take a history lesson and look back. Like, it's not like Ohio State and Michigan aren't good football teams.
No doubt.
Michigan won the national championship last year. They've been great for the last 4 or 5 years. Same with Ohio State. I mean, those guys are every year in the college football playoff, and so that's hard to beat when you're Penn State. It's not like they're easy games, right? Or that's tough, right? And so I get that Penn State wants to win that game. They felt like they should have. They certainly had their chances. But if you're a Penn State right now, it's like you can't get 2 down, right? You're still a one-loss team. You can win out and still make the playoff. Like, there's still everything you want to play for is still out there. Maybe not the Big Ten championship, who knows? But for where this season can go, if you get hot at the right time and you sneak in there, like, anything can happen. So my hope for Penn State is that they can be frustrated, be upset, and use this as a launch pad to, accomplish their goals for this season. They're still out there.
1000%. I think that's very well said. And there is one team that seems to have gotten hot pretty early now after maybe a sluggish start to begin the year, and that's the number 1 team in the country in Oregon. Another really convincing win against Michigan, 38-17, the final score there. The one storyline that really came from this game was Tej Johnson going out with an injury.
Yeah.
The good news is the reports have already come back. It's not going to be all that serious. It won't be season ending. So they expect him back when they need him the most down the stretch, especially as they get to the Big Ten championship and beyond. But right now, it's just a one-way traffic train for this Oregon Ducks team.
Yeah, they are good, man. And, they'll be number 1 when the playoff comes out, obviously, or the rankings come out tonight. Jordan James added 117 rush yards and a touchdown. Dylan Gabriel, when you watch Dylan, he's efficient. He's played in big games before. Look, he was the Big 12, I think, Offensive Player of the Year last year, right, at Oklahoma. Yeah. He goes to Oregon, big shoes to fill for Bo Nix. They didn't play great early in the season. They snuck by a couple times, but now they're rolling, right? And the sign of a good team is when you lose your best receiver, Tej Johnson, and Trayshawn Holden steps up, catches 150 yards and a touchdown. Like, that's the sign of a well-coached, depth, talented group of guys. And the way that Dylan manufactures completions throughout the game, quick game, then he pushes it down the field, then they run a little play action, then he runs his own read. Like, they're in a groove right now, and to me, they're the best team in the country as it stands.
It seems like they've proven that tenfold so far, outgained Michigan 470-270 in this game. I do want to talk about the game that you were at, because you mentioned Indiana earlier and how impressive they've been and where they might be ranked when the rankings come out tonight. They trailed for the first time this season, 10-0 in the first quarter. And look, Todd and I were at Michigan State a couple of weeks ago. We know how explosive Aiden Childs can be when he's playing clean football. That defense is generally pretty good. And then you look up, I think we blinked a couple times, and it was like a 3-score game out of nowhere. And it ends up being 47-10. The Fighting Signettis roll on, remain undefeated.
Yeah, look, the storyline going into that game was Curtis Rourke, right? Like, he's leading the nation in pass efficiency, and he hurt his thumb, right? He had surgery. He missed their game against Washington. comes back. He's wearing a little glove, a little protective thing over his thumb, and started out a few incompletions. They dropped the ball. It was windy, a little bit chilly, so it's like, okay, well, we'll find out. And all of a sudden, he got a couple completions under his belt, and he looked like the Curtis Rourke we've seen all year. What's interesting about this Indiana team, and I know people are starting to learn about them. They're gonna about to make some noise. I mean, they may beat Michigan by 2 or 3 scores this weekend. Bloomington's gonna be rocking, but their top 5 pass catchers are all receivers. And on top of that, what I love about Indiana and their offense, I think Cignetti, Sunseri, and Mike Shanahan is kind of a combined effort, but Shanahan calls the plays, and he's the receivers coach. And when you watch this team, they're very effective running football. Their offensive line is strong.
Very.
But they motion the stacks, they cut their splits, they spread you out. Their receivers block down the field. Their receivers do it all. And they're very good at the top of their route, separating in man coverage, finding the soft spots in zone. They are extremely well coached. And you got a guy, Curtis Rourke, pulling the trigger back there, who's accurate, who we made the comparison of him and Sam Bradford during the game because they stand the same. They're both 6'5". They throw a real pretty ball. They put the ball in places where their receivers can go up and make a play. Like, they're very friendly throws. And so, listen, they're extremely fun to watch. They ripped off 47 unanswered points. Honestly, they could have scored 60. They pulled them off late in the third quarter. And if you're Michigan State, look, you got to be a little bit frustrated, right? But I do think that they are building something that will sustain. Like Jonathan Smith, Brian Lindgren, like on offense, Joe Rossi on defense. Like, they brought in 61 new players. They're still trying to. They got banged up. Aiden went out of the game, third quarter. But there's pieces there that they can build on, and they're gonna improve pretty quickly. You look at what they did in the first quarter, just marched up and down the field, stopped Indiana couple third downs. They got to Curtis Rourke, flushed him a little bit, and then it just unraveled. But they're a lot closer than what I think people think. They're going to be a good football team. But, listen, Indiana's done that to everybody this year. It's not just Michigan State.
1,000%. We saw what they did in Nebraska, who going into that game had one of the best ranked defenses in the entire country. I'm with you on Michigan State, by the way. I think give it 2 years. I think in 2 years, when Aiden Childs is a senior, should he still be there, that's a team that wins 10-plus games. I think it's a program that's going in the right direction. My bold prediction, so I saw Cam Ward 2 years ago at Washington State. He had transferred from Incarnate Word at that point. And everybody was like, what's the deal with this quarterback? He's got something, but he's reckless. He just doesn't quite throw the ball in the right place all the time. But then there were flashes where you're like, whoa, this is incredible. I think you give Cam Ward the 2 years similar to that. Aiden Childs the 2 years similar to Cam Ward. I'm not saying he's going to be the leader for the Heisman, but I'm saying he's going to be dangerous. He's going to be a weapon at this level, and especially in this conference because Nick Marsh, that freshman wide receiver, is really, really good. And they've got some other pieces that are going to develop alongside of what Childs is capable of. I love what his future looks like, and therefore I love, to your point, what Michigan State's future looks like.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think if you're Michigan State, you got to do everything you can to find a way to keep Nick Marsh. I imagine every team in the country is going to be trying to find a way to get him on their team with the state of college football right now, and NIL and the portal, and but Nick Marsh is a monster. You hear a lot talking about Ryan Williams and Ryan Wingo at Texas and Jeremiah Smith and these guys. Like, Nick Marsh is up there. I'm telling you, he hasn't had a lot of targets. They're trying to figure out ways to get him. In the first quarter, he had 5 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown, right? First quarter and a half. And then, Aiden gets hurt and they just things unravel for him. But Aiden Childs, Nick Marsh, they're taking their lumps right now, right? They really couldn't protect them. They're banged up on the offensive line. So there's a lot to like there in Michigan State. And more importantly, I think Jonathan Smith is a really good football coach.
Yes, agreed. Let's move over to second down. And this is a new segment here. Fair point or scare point. We'll go quickly through a couple of the other games of what we saw last week. Already went through the top 4 teams in the conference. Let's go to Minnesota beating number 24 Illinois 25-17 Is it fair or scare? Minnesota can run the table the rest of the season, the remaining schedule at Rutgers, home versus Penn State, at Wisconsin. And right now, Colt, they're playing as well as anybody in the conference.
They are, and I think this is fair. I think Minnesota can run the table. Their biggest test is going to be Penn State. Wisconsin struggled a little bit. Rutgers is kind of reeling. They've lost their last four. You talk a lot about quarterbacks in this conference, especially the transfer quarterbacks. Dylan Gabriel, Will Howard, Will Rogers, Curtis Rourke. Well, Max Brosmer is actually playing really good football right now. He threw for 200 yards and a touchdown last week. Their run game is nice. And so they pick up their fourth win, and now they're bowl eligible. They're 4-2 in the Big Ten. I think this is fair. I mean, Illinois is a good football team, well coached. They've had some big wins this year. Yep. Illinois 6-3. So I mean, I think it's fair. I mean, I don't know if they can beat Penn State, but if Penn State doesn't come out and handle their business against Washington, things could go south pretty quickly for them.
I'm with you. This is absolutely fair. Row the boat, ski you ma. That's all I will say. UCLA defeats Nebraska 27-20 in Lincoln. This is a brutal loss for Nebraska. So is it fair or scare that Nebraska's season is on the ropes? They've lost now 3 in a row. They're 5-4 on the season, and they have at USC, home for Wisconsin, at Iowa the last 3, and they're just trying to get back to that bowl eligibility. It has been a long time in Lincoln since they've had that. Fair or scare, season's on the ropes.
That's fair. It's totally fair. Season's on the ropes. So look, it's going to be tough for them at USC, although I know they can do it. And they got Wisconsin at home, so there's 2 very, good opportunities for them to find a way to get to a bowl game. I called Nebraska game early in the year, and that's all they talked about was these seniors, these fifth-year guys that all decided to come back. Like, getting to a bowl game was their main goal. And honestly, I did not see Nebraska losing 4 in a row. I mean, I just didn't. I think they're well coached. I think they've just had some miscues, and when you're a rebuilding style football team and you make crucial mistakes, like it's hard to overcome those. I'm a big fan of Dylan Raiola. Yep. He's been a little bit up and down. He exited the game last week. Hopefully he's okay. If he stays healthy, I think that yes, it's fair that their season is on the ropes, but I also think that getting to a bowl game is right there in your grasp.
And honestly, that still feels like step number 1 for them. I know that for this team and for what Matt Rule has done maybe at previous stops where year 2 it's been 10+ wins, 11 wins, etc. Maybe there was an expectation of that in Lincoln specifically. But to me, the first step still has to just be getting to bowl eligibility, playing in the postseason. Now you can move forward, and Dylan Raiola will have a full year of starting experience under his belt coming back with what should be still an excellent team around him. The game we did, Todd and I, was an interesting one at that. Wisconsin had won 3 straight games, then they lose to Penn State, but gave them a solid game, and they go to Iowa and just get smacked by the Hawkeyes. 42-10 is the final score, and it was another huge game for Caleb Johnson. 135 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns. So fair or scare, Caleb Johnson can be the Big Ten Player of the Year, Colt.
That's pretty bold, but I'm going to say fair for this reason. I love the way Brendan Sullivan came in and played, right?
Yeah, he did. He was great.
You haven't seen that in Iowa in a long time. A dual threat guy who's decent throwing the ball, but like he was dynamic rushing the ball. Iowa is built on controlling the clock. You've hardly ever seen them score 40 points. They've done it like 3 times this year. But I think it's fair in the fact that like they're pretty good up front. Brendan Sullivan brings that element of zone read, of creating some plays to take some heat off of him. And Caleb Johnson is tough to bring down. He's a strong runner. I just feel like I was built for this. Now, in order for that to happen, they're gonna have to win out. I mean, if you want to be the Big Ten Player of the Year, your team's got to go win 8 or 9 football games, and so I guess I'm saying it's fair. It could happen.
It could happen. I don't necessarily think it will happen, but I will say Caleb Johnson, 9 years out of 10, would be the Doak Walker Award winner. Just with the stats, he's got 19 touchdowns on the season already through 9 games. If he goes, the single season record for Iowa touchdowns scored is Sean Green with 20. He's going to shatter that. and he might shatter the yards record as well. Any
Wow.
other year without Ashton Genty, he's winning the Doak Walker Award. It just happens to be the same year that a guy is basically on pace with Barry Sanders. So insane in all that. So yes, fair, but I would say unlikely. Last one would be Washington defeats USC 26-21. The Trojans now really reeling. So fair or scare that Lincoln Riley is on the hot seat. I will say word did come this morning that they're making a quarterback change. Miller Moss is going to be going to the bench. Jaden Maeva is going to be starting after the bye week. That's the UNLV transfer who actually came in and played well last year, was the freshman of the year in the conference. So he comes over to USC, a lot of hype around him. We'll see if that makes a difference. So is it fair or scare that Lincoln Riley's on the hot seat after another loss?
Man, this is a tough one. I don't know what Lincoln Riley's buyout, but I know that they gave him basically everything he wanted coming from Oklahoma. So I don't know how, if you're USC, if you get out of that. But I would say, look, the expectations haven't been met by USC. I get they're rebuilding. They had the Heisman Trophy winner last year. They couldn't figure it out. They didn't have a defense. Now their defense is playing a little bit better. But listen, like this one's tough. I mean, you and I both know, like, USC they're a blue blood in college football. Like they should be winning 10, 11, 12 games, competing, and they just haven't done that since Lincoln Riley got there. And so I think it's fair to say that he's on the hot seat. But I just don't know. I don't know where that. It's not like he's going to get fired this year. There's just no way.
That's why I'm going to say scare for now, because I don't think he gets fired this year. But I would say going into next year, he would start to be on the hot seat. And I lived in LA for 4 years, Colt, and I just know how the SC, there are a lot of SC fans that stay in that area. I know how they feel about the football program, to your point. I know what the expectation is. And that first year when Caleb did win the Heisman and they were in the college football playoff conversation until the Pac-12 championship with a complete collapse against Utah, there was optimism that, hey, okay, we've got our guy now for the future. He's going to be here for the next 2 decades. Everything's going to be all right. We know exactly. It just hasn't worked out that way yet. But I will say this. I know they've lost, I think, now 5 games yet this season. They're 4-5 now. I think I'm almost positive. Actually, no, I am positive. All 5 games have been by 1 score.
That's right.
So they're right there. I mean, I know that 4-5 is not where they want to be. But at the same time, you said something about Michigan State taking their lumps. It does feel like SC is doing that just enough right now where they've been competitive in all of these games. They just need that next step. And maybe that's where Maeva coming in and starting at quarterback can be the beginning of the shift into next season.
Yeah, I think that's right. And when you look at the Big Ten, I see Oregon, I see Ohio State, and I see Penn State, and Indiana came out of nowhere. And then outside of that, I would put all these teams like equal. The Minnesotas, the Michigans, the USCs, the Michigan State. Like, there's a little bit of difference, but they're all like, those games can go either way, right? They went down to the wire with Michigan. They went down to the wire with Minnesota. They went down to the wire with Penn State, right? Barely lost, maybe overtime. I can't remember.
Yes,
but like
overtime.
So they're right there, but they certainly haven't taken that next step. And so, yeah, I think next year, like, they got to be able to do that.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see if they can. All right, let's take a look at our NBC and Peacock matchups for Week 11 and start with the noon game on NBC, Minnesota and Rutgers. Rutgers really could use a win to get back into some positive momentum, just trying to get back to bowl eligibility again. I mean, they've got one of the best backs in the country in Kyle Monangai, certainly in the Big Ten. 931 yards, 10 touchdowns. They need to run the ball effectively, but we mentioned it. Right now, Minnesota's playing as well as anybody in the conference.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I don't think Rutgers defense is going to be able to stop them. They're giving up 390 yards of offense. And in the Big Ten, like in a team like Minnesota who can control the clock, and Max Brosmer's playing really good. I don't see Rutgers kind of winning this football game. I see Minnesota, playing well. They've got some momentum. They're now bowl eligible. I think they see this on their schedule as a game that it's a must win for Minnesota, in the stance that, like, we got to continue to build on what we're doing.
Yeah, I know that Greg Schiano cannot be happy with the defense his team is playing. Let's move on to our 8 p.m. game on Peacock exclusive. Washington at number 6 Penn State. Number 6 right now in the AP poll. We'll see what they are in the CFP poll. Either way, this is on Peacock and it is the whiteout. I am very curious, Colt. How does Penn State respond after a really emotional loss last week? That is always difficult.
Yeah, that's extremely difficult. Look, fans are pissed off, coaches pissed off. They lost to a team that they really had a chance to beat at home for the first time in a long time. And like my biggest concern for Penn State, is will they bring enough energy to this game against Washington to
Right.
get themselves back on track? Like, can Penn State understand that, like, hey, we can still make the playoff. We lost to the number 2 or number 3 team in the country. Like, that's not going to hurt us that much. But we gotta like wake up and go play, because I'll tell you, we talked about all these teams that are kind of middle of the pack, can go either way in the Big Ten conference, and not Washington's right there, right? Washington can sneak up and beat anybody.
They're
They're well
good.
coached.
They're deceptively good.
Will Rogers is good. Jonah Coleman's good. Their defense flies around. They do a lot of different structural things on defense. They'll show you one thing and play another. They'll blitz you. They're a well coached football team, and they're a team that's rebuilding just like these other teams we talked about. And so you can't sleepwalk into this game if you're Penn State. I think they got to utilize Tyler Warren. I think he's got to show up more. Like, there's so many things that you can do with a versatile guy like him. And again, like, fans, bring it. This is the whiteout game, right? It's the night game. I know you're pissed off about last week, but like this is a game that Penn State has to come out ready to play, shooting on all cylinders, and just from the first quarter to the end, bring it. Like, just bring it, because if you don't, Washington's good enough to hang around and find a way.
Washington's similar to Michigan State in the sense the next year or two, they're going to be really, really good. Damon Williams, their freshman quarterback, has a chance to be special, replacing Will Rogers in the future. I feel the message you're giving is similar to what Gordon from Dodgeball got. You got to get angry. You got to get mean. I think that's what Penn State's got to play with, use that emotion maybe from a disappointing loss last week. Let's move to our upset meter for some ranked teams in the Big Ten this week. 1 being not likely, 10 being likely on the upset meter. And let's start with Maryland at number 1, Oregon. Where do you have this one on the upset?
I have this at like a 1. I mean,
Yeah.
I just don't think there's any chance. Look, I mean, I know Billy Edwards ranks 3rd in the Big Ten in passing yards. They're a good football team. We talk about it. I bring it up again. Like, there's a bunch that are just right there. But I mean, Oregon's the best team in the country. They've got a lot to play for. They're proving themselves. I just don't think this is likely.
Yeah, you would have to outscore Oregon, which is really difficult to do because I don't see you stopping that offense. Let's go to Purdue at number 3, Ohio State. Feels similar.
Very similar. I'd probably put this at a 1. I mean, like, give me a reason to believe in Purdue.
Hudson Card has experience.
Yeah, just
he's a Texas guy. He's a Texas guy,
Guy, right? I like Hudson Card a lot. They've struggled. Ohio State's coming off a pretty emotional win back at home. Yeah, there's no chance.
Yeah, I would say that you're probably spot on there. This is the one I'm a little more curious about. So Indiana now into the top 10. In all likelihood, it'll be the same for the CFP rankings. Going to Michigan. Look, Michigan hasn't been nearly what they were last year. And if they had, even if it was just slightly above average quarterback play, they'd be right in the mix with any of these teams. They've got so much talent around that position on both sides of the ball that it did feel like they were 1 or 2 decisions away in terms of transfer portal or whatever else from being right there. So where's this on the upset meter? I know that you probably still believe in Indiana to win, but there's a chance.
Yeah. I would put this at like a 3.5,
Yeah.
maybe. Listen, I said this on the broadcast last weekend. The thing about Indiana that is extremely impressive is that they play complementary football just about as good as anybody in the country. Right. But they've started slow the last couple weeks. You look at Washington, they struggled, and then all of a sudden Will Rogers threw 2 picks and they scored 14 points and the game's out of hand. Same thing at Michigan State, right? They were down 10-0. What sparked them? Aiden Childs threw 2 picks. They get 14 points, and all of a sudden the game's out of hand again, and they're rolling. And so, if they start slow again and Michigan doesn't turn the ball over, and Michigan's kind of controlling the clock, and they figure out a way to pound the rock a little bit and kind of let that clock die, and it could be close around halftime, and then I guess you never know. But to me, I'm not concerned about Indiana. I think that's just something that they need to improve upon. as they get towards the end of this Big Ten schedule. But that would be Michigan's only hope, because Indiana is explosive. And I've talked to a few people this week, and after watching him, like, with my own eyes from the booth, like, Indiana is athletic. They are way more athletic than what you think. Their defense had 15 tackles for loss against Michigan State. 15. I don't know if I've ever been a part of that game. Other than, us almost getting beat by Nebraska in the Big 12 championship when Sue had 15, TFLs himself. But their defense is really good, and so I'm heavy Indiana here.
Yeah, the last thing that any college quarterback wants to see is Ndamukong Suh coming right up the middle. That might be the worst possible image you could get.
No question. No question.
Let's move on to our Xfinity Big Connections. And this is a revenge game this week. Rutgers quarterback Athan Kaliakmanis playing against his former team in Minnesota on Saturday afternoon on NBC. Kaliakmanis 3 years at Minnesota before transferring ahead of this season. Over 2,500 passing yards, 17 touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns in his Minnesota career. He started the entire season last year. The Greek Rifle, one of the better nicknames in the conference as well. At Rutgers so far this year, a little over 1,500 passing yards, 9 touchdowns, 5 picks, and 1 rushing touchdown. Replaced Gavin Wimsatt. But I love a good revenge game. And Minnesota has obviously been happy with their quarterback situation. They valued the experience at the position, similar to Indiana, and that's what Curt Cignetti certainly has valued across his team, is experienced guys in college football. But they got that in their quarterback position over at Minnesota, and you could say the same here for Rutgers, getting a guy who's experienced and early in the season looked strong. But as mentioned, it's been kind of a downward slope since then. So excited to see this quarterback battle and excited to see a revenge game. I always like a good revenge game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that would be the storyline going into this game, right? Kaliakmanis spent a lot of time at Minnesota, rode the boat for 3 years, and now he's at Rutgers. Look, I think Minnesota is just more talented than them. I think they've got a little bit more to play for. But if Rutgers can stop their 4-game losing skid, it's going to come down to how well the quarterback plays. And I know he's got a chip on his shoulder, and this is a game he's probably had circled on his schedule since it came out. And so this will be a fun one to watch for sure.
Yeah, he's a confident kid. He's athletic. He can move. So it's going to rely on him extending some plays, potentially getting some big pickups on the ground as well. Let's go to Xfinity Third Chair. Time for some fan-submitted questions presented by Xfinity. I love this first one, by the way, Colt. Who would be your number 1 pick in a Big Ten fantasy football draft? I've got some ideas, but I'd love to hear yours.
Oh my goodness. This is I've been thinking about this for a while since we sent the script yesterday. A lot of good players here, right? A lot of good football players, running backs, receivers. I mean, listen, Jeremiah Smith, the young guy, I'm an offensive guy, so that would be up there. But I'm going to go ahead and throw this out there. If we're playing fantasy football in the Big Ten, I'm taking Curtis Rourke. Listen, he's leading the league and leading his league, but also the country in pass efficiency. He drops dimes. He doesn't feel pressure. One of the things I loved about what Curt Cignetti said about him was that, look, I like him because he's a low blood pressure guy. And I was like, expand on that a little bit. He was like, listen, he's the same guy on Tuesdays as he is on Fridays, as he is on game days. Like, things don't go well, it doesn't matter. He steps back in and just rolls. Like, you can't ever tell an ounce of emotion off of him. And I love that. And then his game backs it up, right? He's got weapons to throw to. His offensive line is a veteran group. They're strong. They can run the ball to protect him. And he puts the ball in the money. Like, so from a fantasy football perspective, I don't know how you don't go with him.
I know how you don't go with him. It's by picking Caleb Johnson, number 1. Caleb Johnson has 19 touchdowns. He's got 3 games with 3 touchdowns this season. He's been knocking on the door of a 4-touchdown game. If I'm going just strictly fantasy football, I want a guy who is getting it done on the ground like that, because that is not easy to find. And I know in this conference, you've got some great running backs, but there is nobody even close to what he's doing right now. And I know you mentioned it. Their offensive line is probably the best Iowa offensive line I've seen in at least 4 or 5 years. The way that they're blocking together, Tim Lester coming in as the offensive coordinator, the inside zone, the zone read, everything that they've brought, man, Caleb Johnson has benefited more than anybody in the country. So that'd be my number 1 pick. And
That's not a bad one. That's not a bad one. I mean, listen, I think those two guys are in the running for, Big Ten Player of the Year, right? I mean, they got to be at the top.
Yeah, those two. Dylan Gabriel is going to be a fun race the rest of the way. Second question submitted this week: who has the best student section in the Big Ten? I know you haven't been to every school yet, but you've been to a couple of them. So where would you rate it?
Yeah, listen, I mean, I think I'm very excited about going to Penn State. I mean, I never got to play there in college, but they were all Penn State's always good, right?
Yes.
And you hear about the whiteout game and the guys that the AQ Shipleys, all these guys that Trace McSorley, these guys that Saquon, the teammates that I've had throughout the years just talk about like that game when they go whiteout and it's at night and it's in Happy Valley, like there ain't nothing better. And so for me, I'm excited to feel that. And I hope that their fans bring the energy this week. I know we talked about that earlier. Just the importance of this game for Penn State coming off an emotional loss. So I want to do that. I mean, I called the Nebraska game early in the season, and they were, I played there a couple times. That stadium is incredible.
Yes.
I mean, not just their student section, but their fan. I mean, how 300, 400 sellouts straight through the years. I mean, they're there early, they're loud, and that would be a hard one to beat. And I've experienced that as a player as well. It's a really fun place to play. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I'm leaving a few out. I mean, but that's really from my experience in the Big Ten. I played at Ohio State early in my career, and that was wild. I mean, it was the first game that they had when they brought in lights. They normally play during the daytime, but back in 2005, they brought in the lights, and wow. I mean, my ears were hurting for a week after that. And so there's some awesome stadiums here. I wasn't, to be fully honest, I wasn't that impressed with Michigan. I mean, Michigan's a huge stadium, but it wasn't like crazy. I mean, there was that, I didn't feel like it was too loud or too rowdy or I mean, that's my take. I don't know, but like that's how I feel.
I would tell you that it also depends on the type of season everybody's having. Michigan last year, when they were as dominant as they were, fans were that much more excited for them. And that's a program that's still, it's not a fair weather program to say, but they are more excited about their team. Naturally, it's going to be a little loud, a little more insane. I would say you mentioned a lot of the good ones. Camp Randall, Wisconsin is high up there as well. Their students are very into it. But the key in this question is best student section in particular. I think.
Yeah. What about Oregon? I haven't.
Oregon's got to be very much high up there. That's one of the loudest stadiums I've ever experienced. Period. Forget just overall vibe or whatever. Loudest. It is loud, and they are highly, I would say, entertained is one thing, but educated is the other one. They are smart fans. They know when to make noise, how to make noise, when to boo, when to cheer. All of those little things that you don't think about. They're engaged. So that's what I look for, is engaged fans and engaged student sections. I would say Oregon. I know you mentioned Nebraska, very much in there. Penn State for sure is in there. Wisconsin definitely. And I would say the one that probably is a little more underrated is Iowa. I think Kinnick. It's another one of these towns where Iowa football is so important, and it is the biggest thing to do in town. And that does stand for a lot. So I always love going, especially a night game at Kinnick. You can feel the energy in there, as we did last week. But either way, Colt, congrats, man. You made it through your first full Big Talk. How you feeling?
Let's go. I feel good, man. You carried me along. That was fun.
We'll do it again hopefully soon. We appreciate you for tuning in. A Big Talk with Todd and Noah, and today with Colt, presented by Xfinity. Make sure to download and subscribe on the NBC Sports YouTube channel and wherever you get your audio podcasts. And we will, as always, talk to you next week.